Welcome back. Well, as we've heard, Israel and Syria have a long history of conflict, but why would they consider fighting again? Well, the main point of contention between the two is the Golan Heights. Israel's occupied this fertile plateau since the 1967 war. For Israel, it's an important source of water and a vantage point from which to monitor Syrian activity. The occupation's never been recognized internationally, and Damascus wants the land back. It says any peace deal must include returning control of the Golan Heights. Another possible flashpoint: Syria is home to leaders of Palestinian faction Hamas, including top man Khalid Mash'al, and Israel has been accused of attacking Hamas targets in Syria in the past. Well, we're joined by our guest once again in Damascus, Dr. Essam al-Zaim, Director of the Arab Center for Strategic Studies and former Syrian Minister of Planning. In Jerusalem, Dr. Alan Leal, a former Director General of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, who has been heavily involved in unofficial talks with Syria. And in Washington, D.C., Mark Perry, the Director of the Conflicts Forum. He's also a writer and a Middle East expert. Well, if I could start once again with Dr. Essam, looking at some of the recent statements from Syrian officials. They've said that if peace doesn't work, they will consider other measures to bring back the Golan Heights. Some have even talked about starting resistance operations. Is that serious talk, and what are the options open to Damascus?
Well, let us come back to what you were saying. Golan Heights are part of Syrian territory. International law is very clear on that. Any change in the morphology, in the landscape of an occupied territory is prohibited by international law. So the international law is set definitely on the Syrian side. And this is not only a matter of Syrian claim, it's a matter of respecting international legitimacy. On the other hand, contacts took place in the past. What we are here is about putting arguments on the table. And I think that what was said about Bush is very true. And that confirms what I was saying, that there is a serious threat of war, because Bush is an adventurous politician, and he is losing ground in Iraq, and he needs some credit, and he's always putting pressure on Syria.
All right, sorry to interrupt you, but from the perspective of Damascus, if the US, as you're saying, is not helping you out in the direction that Damascus would like, what are the alternative options for Damascus?
Well, Syria is continuing to put pressure politically and internationally. It's trying to consolidate and reinforce Arab solidarity. People, the Palestinians and the Syrians, are on the same side. All the Arabs are affected by the Israeli aggression against the Arabs, and that is the main instrument in the hand of Syria. It's consolidating its national front, it's consolidating its interior front, and it's trying to consolidate Arab solidarity. But on the other hand, there are also other forces. I don't think we can talk internationally only about Mr. Bush. There is also Europe, there is also Russia, there is also China. There are different forces in the international scene and in the regional scene, and therefore Syria's initiatives goes along different directions, as you can imagine.
All right, let's go over to Mark Perry in Washington. This fall, the United States is planning a Middle East peace conference, but Bashar al-Assad and his government haven't been invited. The Syrians won't be there. What does that say about Washington's stance, and is peace possible without the involvement of the United States?
Well, the Syrians haven't been invited to the autumn peace conference. I understand that, but I think I'm very skeptical that this peace conference in the fall is even going to happen. The Saudis and the Israelis and the Palestinians have a long way to go before we reach October and November, where this conference is going to take place. I'd like to respond to my colleagues in Damascus and Tel Aviv. I don't quite understand why Israel needs permission, or a green light, as it was said, from Washington, from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and from Mr. Bush to conduct negotiations with Syria. Since when is Israeli foreign policy a function of what the President of the United States says? The President of the United States is not going to give the green light to Israel to talk with Syria. We know this. He's blamed Syria for meddling in Iraq. He's blamed Syria for meddling in Lebanon. The policy of the United States government is to put pressure on Syria. not to allow them to talk to Israel.
But isn't the
Why
argument,
doesn't Israel
Mr. Perry,
just
sorry to
go
interrupt
ahead?
you, but isn't the argument that if the United States is not involved, the Syrians won't have so much of an incentive to conduct peace talks?
Well, the United States wasn't involved when there was a first opening with the Palestinians back in the 1980s. The Stockholm and Oslo negotiations between Mr. Arafat and the Rabin government took place without the knowledge of the United States. Certainly the United States lent a hand once the talks were underway, and they were key in finishing the talks and bringing the leaders to Washington. But there have been instances, other instances in the region where governments have been able to get together without the green light from Washington. And we have a very weak government here in the United States, and a government that is embroiled in real controversy about the Iraq War. I don't know why Israel simply doesn't go ahead and have face-to-face meetings with Syria. It's certainly possible to do, and allow Washington to catch up as it did in the 1980s during the Israeli-Palestinian talks.
All right, let's talk about face-to-face meetings. Dr. Alan Leal, President Bashar al-Assad has said the two countries have had indirect talks. You've spoken about the talks, the unofficial talks that you have been involved in. How close are the two sides to agreement?
I think that at the moment, President Bashar al-Assad and Prime Minister Ehud Olmert would like to have a peace agreement between Israel and Syria. But the United States must understand that the situation at the moment is very different than at the times at 96 and the year 2000 when we were speaking to Syria directly before. At the moment, Syria is an ally of Iran. Once it enters the room with Israel, it is losing Iran. It has to be compensated for this, like the Egyptians were compensated for losing the Soviet Union and moving to the Western Bloc. I do not understand how experts in the United States do not see this situation. I, who led the unofficial talks, believe that if there will be an Olmert-Bashar Assad meeting tomorrow, it will fail. We cannot have such a meeting without a mechanism that will drastically change the Syrian behavior in the region. This
just to
mechanism
clarify
has
there,
to have
Dr.
an
Leal,
American component.
just to clarify there, when you talk about compensating, what you're really saying is that the United States should compensate Syria even before you move to the official open talks, correct?
Yes, the United States, in fact, was involved in creating this situation of bad guys and good guys in the Middle East. Now, if you want to have a country switch camps from the bad guys to the good guys, it is leaving the bad guys who are helping them financially, militarily. The good guys have to compensate. First of all, have to open their arms. The United States is not letting Bashar Assad out of his corner. And as long as he's in this Iranian corner, he can never get the Golan Heights. And I'm very surprised that the United States doesn't understand it.
All right, let's bring in Dr. Essam Zaim into the discussion, talking there about bringing Syria out of its alliance with Iran, perhaps breaking its alliance or good relations with some of the Palestinian and Lebanese factions. Some say that's a price Syria would be more than willing, more than happy to pay if it could get back the Golan Heights. Is that how you read the situation?
Well, I think we are simplifying really the issues. First of all, the Syrian politics cannot be defined as being with Iran or against Iran. This is ridiculous. It's very simplification, pure simplification. I think that Syrian-Iranian relationship is an important relationship, but it does not mean at all that it is the determinant of Syrian politics. Iran has its politics, it has its way of maneuvering, its tactics, so does Syria. There is no doubt that there are links between the Iranian and the Syrian problems seen from the American point of view and the Israeli side. I think that the conflict is today about not being with or against Iran. It is about recovering the natural rights of the Arabs. In the first place, the right of Syria to recover its land. In the same level, more substantively maybe, is the right for the Palestinians to recover their rights, and the obligation for Israel to respect international legitimacy and to withdraw from the territory and to stop colonizing more land and bringing more immigrants.
Right.
I think this is the whole issue.
Okay.
And therefore, let me just say, I personally think that United States and Israel have to address the real problem. These are the real problems. In Lebanon, for example, the United States has been intervening so brutally in Lebanese politics. And the issue in Lebanon is a very important issue. Is Lebanon a sovereign state or not a sovereign state?
All right. Well,
in the same way,
we're running out. We're running out of time.
Yeah.
I just want to quickly try and bring Dr. Leal back in the discussion. Are you aware, and have you been involved in any unofficial, secretive talks since the end of the Lebanon war?
It's more difficult now since the talks have been exposed, but we are continuing to keep the contact,
right.
Definitely on a lower level. I just want to put one idea, and I think since we are so dependent on President Bush, I think
It'll
there
have to
is
be a very
only
quick idea because we're running out
person-
of time.
Yeah, the idea is Tony Blair. I think if Tony Blair, as the representative of the quartet, will get into the Israeli-Syrian issue, within a year he will get the Nobel Peace Prize.
All right, well, we'll have to wait and see if Tony Blair is the solution, and thank our guests in the meantime, Dr. Essam Zaim from the Arab Center for Strategic Studies, Dr. Alan Leal, former Director General from the Israeli Foreign Ministry, and Mark Perry from the Conflicts Forum. Thank you all for joining us here on Inside Story. And thank you, the viewer, for joining us here on this show. We welcome, as always, your comments and suggestions. Feel free to email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. For now, it's goodbye.